everybody, and welcome back to another special edition of the Cosmic History Codes with myself, Cosmic Space Weatherman David Farrell, and my co-pilot for this mission, the wonderful one and only Leslie Shankman. Hi, sister, how are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to co-pilot today.
Actually, probably Leslie is the pilot, and I'm just the co-pilot. So I'm here to pick up the pieces we can say around the outside, whilst this wonderful narrator and teacher of the Stellar Nations Pathway is going to share with us today the Stellar Nations family that she has selected to represent this, the sixth moon in our ongoing 13 moon journey, or the Legend of Turtle Island. So we're here in the sixth moon, which correlates with the sixth tone in the 1320 calendar, which is the rhythmic tone. So, for those of you that have been following, myself and Leslie have been working our way through the magical 13 tones that also appear in the 1320 calendar, whilst correlating it to the 13 nations, so to speak, with the Stellar Nations pathway, which is really interesting because it leads us inwards to our internal DNA and our connection to the cosmos. So, Leslie, how are you doing? What would you like to share at this point of the journey? Because we're about halfway through this 13 moons, and what has been appearing to you as part of the process?
Well, in this particular one, maybe because it's now the sixth and we're into it, so much correlation and awareness is coming up from the inside about what is the true nature of these tones that are repeating patterns and are really taking us through a cycle of development. So I would show you where I'm getting with that in today's. Like
Hmm.
each time, as each moon goes and we feel deeper into the tone, well, first of all, we're getting deeper into the developmental pattern, right?
Right.
Because we're manifesting something. It's really those 13 tones are like a wave of manifestation. You start with an idea or a focal point.
Absolutely.
So what's manifesting in me is a much deeper awareness of this well, when something manifests, let's say it starts from nothing, an idea, and then it
Right.
starts to coalesce.
Hmm.
So I feel this six rhythmic tone is really kind of well, for me, it really made things start to coalesce in a new way, but maybe that's a reflection of the tone as well. So when we talk, we can talk about that. Or maybe it's a reflection of where we are in the development process, that suddenly it just,
I agree.
you sort of you command a little bit more of what's trying to be developed.
I think that's really important, Leslie, what you just said there, because it's when we get to the sixth tone and things get into balance that all of the homework that we've been doing, the building of the form, the catalyzing the charge, and all of that directing the energy, it's only when we get to the balancing of the sixth that after that we start tuning in. We go to the resonant tone, and then it's galactic, then it's solar, then it's planetary, and the energies are getting bigger and becoming less personal. So those first six tones, as I've observed working with this for a while, is that when you get to that place, whatever it is that you're working on in the context of the wave spell, or the 13, in this case, we're filming in the blue hand wave spell, whatever your set intention from day one was, by the time you're getting to day seven, you're sort of really getting more clarity on what it is that you want to tune to, so that the resources and things you need to manifest on day 10 or maybe day 11 with the planetary tone and the spectral tone, you have everything that you need. And by the time you get to the solar tone on day 9, which is another intention day, it's really just
Mhm.
a case of fine tuning. And so once you get into this mindset of every day being important, those first 6 days are the building blocks of your creation, whether it's a manifestation, a project, or maybe a healing that you need to go through. If you
Mhm.
follow the steps in the way that they're laid out, you have a perfectly created, high Mayan, universal piece of technology that is essentially designed to get us into telling stories. Because New
Right.
Earth, as I understand it, is all about the story. And with the 13, you always have the magical essence of the 13 to tell a perfect story, which I love as a storyteller. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And I also saw this, and it'll come out a little bit when I talk about it and why I correlated it with the dragons. It's an interesting choke point potentially. You could, this is where you could fall off your intention and not manifest it.
That's true. We've seen this sometimes when working with a weight spell and coming to day 10. If you haven't done the work that was required of you, normally in the first few days, the first five tones what you will manifest is the blockage to what
Oh,
you were
okay.
hoping for.
Yeah, well, okay,
Yeah.
you're manifesting something. You've created that, right?
Right. Or sometimes I've also seen that I had an idea to create something, but I needed to manifest the plan. And the 10 days was actually to manifest the plan. And then the next way spell is to actually manifest the steps of the plan. And so once you get into this mode of working, you can do anything. But with this 13 moons, we're doing this over the course of 364 days, starting in the 25th of July and moving forwards from that point with every 28 days, which is how we're here at this sixth moon about to move into the seventh, because actually from the 7th of January we move into the lizard moon. Right now we're moving into the
And
monkey
in the
moon.
9th of January, we're moving into the
That's right.
next, which
Yes.
I'll have the picture up, but
We're
we're
in
in
the
the
lizard
lizard
moon now. We're moving
right now.
into
Yeah,
the monkey moon. So we have
that's
this
right.
new energy coming in to attenuate with after getting balanced, but with the energy of the monkey, which in the 1320 is all about magic and play. So I think that we've got lots of really promising energies to work with if we don't fall prey to the machinations of the matrix, and most of all the matrix mind. And I think this is a lot of the energy that we've been working with, the Ida and Pingala, the left and the right, bringing everything into balance as it comes up the mystical central column, so that we get the awakening here in the pineal gland with everything balanced. Because if
Hmm.
it does, it's a bit like a Kundalini awakening. If it comes out unbalanced, it can cause a lot of disturbances.
Right, right.
So I've been feeling we've been going through a planetary Kundalini awakening for the last month or so, and the energy's been rising pretty steadily to the point now where I think it's somewhere around about the heart with today's Venus
Hmm.
Cazimi. I think that this is fire in the heart and it's going to explode people's hearts open, which is another way of
Okay,
saying welcoming into New Earth because it's all heart centered. So exciting
but
times.
we have to do the rhythmic right. And we've had all
Right.
month, and I've had an interesting time feeling into it.
Mm,
Now we can share that. But yeah, the rhythmic meaning, well, the operative word is balance. But let's get into the slideshow, okay?
right.
And just dive
I
in.
like
Is
it.
that
Let's
okay?
do the rhythmic right. That could be a good hashtag.
Okay.
And please, everyone who's watching this video, we love to hear the comments. Please do hit like. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, why not? Please sign up. It's free. Please do check out the YouTube membership where we have the daily glyph readings and other interesting material. But most of all, me and Leslie love to read the comments about how you're experiencing the 13 moons if you're following it. So please do pop those comments in the box. All right, Leslie, over to you.
Okay, I've taken a screenshot from your navigation guide. So we're on the sixth moon in the lizard, as you said. That's just our visual, going to the monkey next. So what I really started to deepen into understanding is that we're following a pathway of creation codes. Each one of these tones is a creation code. And so I've had fun putting together, just to review, I won't go into it deeply, but we said the first moon was the unicorn because it was all about defining our purpose. And the unicorn is that which is a creative, dreaming part of us, wanting to bring things into manifestation. We said the second tone, which is a lunar tone, which is all about understanding challenge and polarity when there's two points of view, made it the winged lion because that's the part of us that aspires to uh, channel the divine. So our challenge or our polarity is to be human and yet move the ego aside enough to let the divine run through us. That's the right use of power. So that's a playoff and really coming to that challenge with the lunar. Then on the electric, we're identifying our service. We're starting to feel into the whole now with our what we want to manifest. And I correlated that with the angel and with the fourth moon, self-existing, where we identify the form, correlated that to the great felines. And that's because the great felines are all about honoring free will and sovereignty and the selfhood, allowing the divine to come through. So we have 1 through 4 being very foundational. And then in the fifth tone, the overtone, we find our center and we kind of take command. And I correlated that to the male and female serpent because I was feeling that without bringing those forces into their complementary wholeness, we couldn't have center. Now, with the sixth moon, the rhythmic, we're going to be asked to find the power of balance. And I correlated that to the dragon. So this will be why. Okay. First of all, there's usually several phrases or words or concepts that are correlated with each tone. So with the rhythmic tone, the principles that we have to understand are we have to organize to balance, and that creates equality. And what does that mean? Well, hopefully when by speaking through this whole thing, we're going to make that a little more real instead of just three words. So what we've got with the sixth tone, it calls for a very stable, balanced flow. We can imagine it connecting the four directions, which is the material world. So that's the earth, with the sky or with the cosmic forces. So with doing that, we're embodying harmony and integration of our purpose. And we're aligning our inner core with the universal center. So let's say that's our material self, aligning with the universal rhythm, the greater cosmic rhythms, so that we can affect our centered and purposeful action. And then how are we achieving balance with this? Well, we need to accept balance, or accept that life is a process. It's an ongoing motion that requires a dynamic organization and reorganization all the time because everything's moving. So we organize the elements of our life to create balance. But we have to realize that all the moments contribute equally to the sacred balance of our lives. Because if we don't kind of just let what is as it comes up be there and unfold, we know how we can get sidetracked left and right. So this is where I suddenly, over the course of this moon, I started thinking about these tones and where we've been so far. And I started going, wait a minute, if we are coming into the first day magnetizing, you have a purpose. So I started seeing these in terms of more of geometries, because that's what we're talking about the whole time, but I didn't really correlate it until now. What are geometries? They're the morphogenic energetic form that's underlying the manifestation. So if we start with the first tone, the magnetizing tone, well, it's just a focal point. It's just an idea, right? And we're saying we want to magnetize that idea. So we're coming up with it, right, as a little idea or a point. So then I started seeing the second tone, the lunar or the challenge is like, all right, if I have a point, the line extends out from the point, it creates another. And then if there's the other, there's two perspectives. Now I've got to start to work with that. That's the challenge. That's the polarity or the duality. And then with the electric, and you and Bella have brought this out in the navigation guide with the underlying geometries, but I just didn't see it the same way until I felt it from the inside, and I'm talking about, oh my gosh, each tone has a morphogenic form for its energy. And that's part of how it's developing. That's why it's a development cycle, and it can bring something into being. So the electric tone is the triangle. Now we're moving to three, a very stable form, the Holy Trinity, three equal sides. Then we get the self-existing tone where we suddenly come into form. Well, it's the square, right? What could be, that is what form is, the four sides, the square. Interestingly, when we got to the overtone, which is finding the radiant center, there's more than one geometric shape that can represent it. We can have the five-pointed star, and then I think you brought this out in the navigation guide too, but that made me think of Michelangelo's, the Vesuvian Man, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
With the legs and the arms and the head.
Right.
But you can have the tetrahedron too.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're looking at the tetrahedron from the top, you've got the radiant center right here.
Yeah.
So now let's move into the geometric shape for the sixth tone. Now we can have even a few more possibilities. We can have the cube, we could have the hexagram, we could have the six-pointed star,
The
which
macabre.
actually, if we extend out of the flat two-dimensional look at it, it can become the Merkaba.
Yeah.
So all this is going to kind of play into why I correlated the dragon, or what we can do, or our dragon parts can do with the rhythmic tone.
Right.
So
Just to add something there, Leslie, as you just alluded to it, the navigation guide to quantum consciousness. There's some funny dude over there in the right-hand corner,
yeah, your
probably
screenshots have
recording.
you guys.
We go into the geometry a lot, and Bella's really good at this stuff and channeled it beautifully. But really, the reason for that is that the inner technology, the quantum world, is made up of these shapes. And once you really start to embody them, I think, as you're obviously doing, Leslie, you can actually feel the shapes inside of you. You can feel them as geometric structures. Particularly, I find the self-existing four pillars or the cross. I find that structure to be super strong inside. But it's taken quite a bit of work, and the more you meditate with these shapes and what their energies and characteristics mean, the more it becomes embodied within you. And that part of the technology, because also each of these shapes, like a six-sided shape, is also representing the sixth dimension. And so these tones also represent the dimensions 1 to 13. So I just wanted to add that in there, Leslie.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so then what Bella said during the navigation guide, she brought up, this is your screenshot. She talked about the cube as
Right.
related to matter. So the cube gives form to matter, and it holds the matrix of time, space, and matter, and it has a dominion over the physical world, the body and material objects.
Yeah.
And then she said, look, you can unfold the cube and it looks like a cross. And she goes,
Right.
well, she said, it's matter. So what are you going to put on matter? I mean, you could stick something on matter and it could kind of stay on the level of matter, which made me kind of think of how we've used the cross to sort of just act like Jesus is a sacrifice. And, we've written a pretty false religious narrative around that. And we've really perverted matter with it, or
Somehow
spirit.
it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, right.
Hey,
So
but
anyway,
you're onto something, Leslie. Zach talks about the cuboid of the universe. You've shifted cuboids of the universe. Maybe some of you remember him saying that on previous videos, and maybe what we're seeing here is the building block for a universe is the cube shape.
well, let's just keep going and we could revisit that based on whatever just kept coming to me with this. Okay.
Okay,
So
great.
when I started thinking about, okay, why is there organization? Why is there balance? What does equality mean? And then I started looking at the phrases that come with each, for each different glyph, if you have a tone of rhythmic, it's going to be I organize in order to, and I'll give you an example. If I take a Skywalker, I organize in order to explore, balancing
Wakefulness.
wakefulness. I seal the process or the output of space, in this case, with the rhythmic tone of equality. So if you take each glyph, you're going to get different fill-in words based on what it is, but you're getting the tone, the rhythmic tone is organizing something to balance it, to
Right.
create equality.
Yes.
Now, but if we go back to our um, quote before, equality, if you go into every moment being relevant, you really can't start. I mean, you're going to stop the flow of the moments if you start judging one thing being more or less than the other. So
Right.
you need sort of this uh, sense of everything is equal, or let's say not even judging it. You make it equal by not even judging it in a way. So
Right.
or what I want to bring out, hopefully, in this a little bit more is, well, what are we organizing? How are we organizing it? How are we balancing it to create this equality? Because when we have the equality, the flow can go. We're not stopping it with judgment. This is better than, this is worse than, or you know what I mean? We're not sticking it into boxes. We're not sticking it back into the lower aspect of matter, like
Right.
freezing it.
It
Does that
seems
make sense?
obvious, but this is such an important point. Otherwise, you end up lopsided.
Yeah, right. Which is exactly why I put this picture here. So the implication is we can have this perfect balance with the right organization and the right understanding of balance, and it creates equality. It doesn't, like, I don't have a judgment over here that suddenly makes this whole thing, go down and be unbalanced. All righty. So I picked the Stellar Nation of the Dragons, and basically in the Stellar Nations, this would be the heart of the warrior. The dragons are yang quality, keepers of divine order, keepers of divine power, divine will, make sure that the heavenly laws are obeyed. It's a very yang kind of approach. It's very hierarchical in that the mission is so important that training and sort of like that Eastern martials art type of approach to things where you have precision and you listen and somebody trains you is all very respected and appropriate for the dragon. So you could say there's almost a hierarchy. But very specifically, to do this, to master this, the dragon has 8 initiations, has to create 8 virtues of being the warrior. And the warrior is, that which would stand up for the principle and even die for it. And in this case, the principle is we're going to stand up for divine will. And we'll talk more about what that is later. But you've got 8 different stars, and it's just literally a pathway of accomplishment. And the first 5 are mastery over elements, balance of fire, balance of water, balance of earth, balance of air, and then the balance of motion, which is really the ether element. So let's look at that a little bit. When we talk about balance and we're talking about, the rhythmic tone, well, this is a very essential component of things we have to balance, because this is basically what the material, manifestation is made out of at this point: fire, water, air, earth. So the dragon part of us has to understand each one of these elements and literally uses them. I mean, we've got dragons as an energetic, well, you say they're part of the elemental kingdom, and they're responsible, literally using these elements to keep the circulatory system, the ley lines of our globe moving, whether you need more fire, water, earth, air. But we also have, well, let me just show you where they are. They're in stars. So, in the stellar nations, we say, okay, each stellar world is actually a real place. It's a nodal point of consciousness. We've got soul aspects living there. And so the first 4 stars that are the elements are in the Draco constellation. So part of the head and then on. And when we talk about mastering the fire element, that would be on the star Rastaban. And, there's literally fire as an element, the flames. But then, of course, we have the metaphysical element of fire, which is that whole determination and that driving force of will that we would use inside of us. Then we've got the star Etamin, which is mastery of the balance of water. And besides the literal water, we're talking about the metaphysical water being our emotions and can we master our emotions? I mean, we can't come into balance, or if we want to find get past the rhythmic tone and not make it a choice point, all these things are important. Our determination, our ability to balance and master our emotions. The earth element is the star Grumman, and that would be, well, that's really our deep relationship with our body, in our body. Like, how do we feel the pranic forces? How can we keep the life force going in a healthy, whole way so that we keep our physical body enervated with the pranic forces? And then mastery of the air element would be in a metaphysical way mastery of our thoughts.
So you know what? Those first three, Leslie, are all pretty much conjunct the galactic center in the 13 sign sidereal in the fucus, which I find intriguing.
That is intriguing, actually, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Right. Especially with this alignment that we're basically in as we're recording this at the moment. There is a big planetary
Uh-huh.
alignment, and it feels like maybe the dragons could be a part of that. I'm really understanding now why you put them in the rhythmic tone.
Yeah, well, and also if you say as above, so below, which is one
Right?
thing we have to balance. So if they're above, right in the galactic center, coming down our central core, uh, you know, well, let's just keep going with it. I think
Yeah.
it'll fit in. So when we get to the fifth element, East ether, I'll mention that star in a minute. But actually, this is where the 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 great Khan, the keeper of divine order, like the chief dragon lives, who's this is his element and his star, and it's his lord of the fifth element, commands the elements, gives the words to stir them up or to still the elements. And that
Yeah.
um, star is Rigel, which is on the foot of the Orion constellation. And I think it's just interesting that that is the star for the balance of motion, because look, when we walk, we have to use our feet to feel and balance the ground, right? But of course, ether and the balance of motion really is dependent on understanding the first four elements, earth, air, water, and fire, and knowing how they operate in balance and work them. And we're talking about opposites here,
Right.
because fire would seem to be opposite of water, and air would seem to be opposite of earth, and yet they need to coexist, and yet they need to balance. And they're these great instruments metaphysically and physically.
And you know what's also interesting here, Leslie? Sorry, on that last picture you've put, you've kind of they look like dragons, but they're interwoven like the Kundalini snakes, and they're pulling a rose apart. And so you've got this fusion here of the sort of more Magdalene energy of the Dragon Queen with the rose, but you've also got the serpent energy in the intertwining way that we see with the caduceus. But they're the snakes who are also in the same family. So we're getting a fusion now. I think we're getting an upgrading of the original draconian primal energy with the younger reptilian serpent energy, which is more full of magic and geomancy, whereas the dragons are much older primordial force. But they also have the same energy at their heart. You know, the snakes and the serpents and the dragons are all from the same family. So it's interesting that where I would have put the snakes here for the rhythmic moon, you put their grandparents, the dragons.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, this came from some ceremony we did years ago, and someone used it for their dragons, and I'm not sure if it comes from some of the Star Nations pictures or not.
I
But
like
yes,
it. It's somehow a
as you
fusion of
said,
dragon and snake. Yeah,
it's apt. It's okay.
yeah,
It's apt.
I like
Well,
it.
especially because of the balance of motion. It's bringing
Oh,
two things
aye.
together. It's going down a central column. It's entwined.
Yeah.
Uh, so now, if we to continue those, once those, let's say those five foundational type of initiations are understood, you take them up to Vega. That's the sixth initiation. And this is where the initiation into the right use of power is. Okay. Meaning the right use of power is to understand that it's not about power over, it's about letting the divine be the come through our central channel and be the power that we exhibit or rule by or live our life by. And this is where the dragons messed up. So let's just keep going for a minute. The next initiation, all these are a little bit more refined. Like before, you talked about how after the rhythmic, we build a foundation and we kind of get into, I don't know how you said it, but we get into more, I don't know, refined or abstract.
It's more etheric, actually, Leslie. We're
Yeah,
moving
yeah.
more into the realms of the energy rather than the structure that needs to. I always think the first six are about really getting the container. The four, the five, and the six is getting the form ready to receive the signal.
Okay.
Yeah, or however.
Okay. So now we go to the seventh initiation. So yeah, we're getting a little more etheric because this is the star Thuban, and this is all about the warrior's mercy. The the warrior having the discrimination in the way that they uh, uphold divine will. When do they give mercy or not? Then the fifth, or I'm sorry, the eighth initiation is algol, and
Uh-huh.
it's a little confusing because it's called the virtue of ruthlessness, which sounds terrible. And honestly, on the lower octave, it is. Uh, Lower octave, ruthless is ruthless. But what this means is executor for the divine, not executioner, but executor. You know how like you get to be in charge of a will and your will says you have to do X, Y, and Z when you're distributing assets. It's literally like the divine has certain rules and principles. And if you're executor for it, there comes a point at which you have to apply those principles to those you're dealing with. Okay. And ruthlessness, I never really know if that's part of maybe it could be translated better from hungry, but it's basically saying you don't mess around with divine will or divine laws. They are what they are. They structure the universe and the galaxy. So in the end, they're the last word.
You know, it's really interesting, Leslie, that this is coming up at this particular moment because this topic is going to become very topical, I think, in the coming days and weeks with many things that have just happened in the last couple of days about who gets to decide who is an executioner for somebody else and who isn't. And I think that this is a really it's a difficult concept to understand, but as you've just explained, that there are situations where somebody has to be the executioner on the behalf of the divine for so
Executor, not
executor, right?
executioner. Executioner is like you cut off the head.
Well,
Ex-
somewhat the
it's
same
kind of
thing.
the same. Yeah,
Because sometimes even in creation, there are some energies that will not transform. They just resist.
right.
And then you're left with this energy that isn't sitting with the other frequencies. And this is very much the moment we're in. So what do you do with that energy? You keep trying to transform it. You keep applying healing if it's able to receive. But you know, this comes up in other Stellar Nation stories. Eventually, you hit a wall sometimes, and you have to ask the divine for help. At which point, they send in somebody to execute the divine will, and sometimes that means the removal or extraction of
No,
something.
no, you're exactly right. And in fact, when you think about the progression of initiations,
Yeah,
you try mercy first,
of course.
but mercy is not always merited. So then you have to go to the harder thing and look at like, my God, this cannot exist within the divine
So,
frequencies.
yeah, I guess you could look at it. What happens if you keep in a war situation? We'll just make something up, but you keep giving the opponent mercy, and the opponent says, "Sure, I accept surrender and mercy, and I promise I'll be a good boy, only to come and attack you again 2 months later or whatever." And this situation persists for a number of years. I'm sure you can imagine in our world that this goes on all the time, and at some point somebody has to say, you know what, every time I give you mercy you come back and kill a bunch of my people, and so every time I give you mercy I'm putting my people's lives at risk. At some point somebody has to make a decision and say, I don't think I want this to continue. So there are those kinds of situations where something is not adhering to the rules of the divine, and some action needs to be taken to recorrect that. Does that make sense?
Right. No, totally. And the thing about it though is the fact that mercy comes first is it speaks of the generosity uh, of of the divine. I will lift you regardless. So the
Yes.
idea is, let's say you literally had your foot on someone's chest and the sword there, but you could see or discern, or you really thought, God, they have learned so much in this
Right.
battle we've had
Yes. Yeah.
that they actually they get it. They're worthy of life. They're if I let them stay in life, they're going to
Yes.
be in service to life because they've learned through our battle.
Beautiful. I agree.
So
That's it. That's the opposite of what I was saying. In those moments, I guess that only special envoys of the divine can make that distinction, because if they get it wrong, then they've got all the karma through maybe an ego decision or something. So they have to be in that
right,
perfect balance to assess what is the real situation with this piece of creation. Is it ready to transform, or does it need to go back in and have a complete refit, so to speak?
right. And it's a huge responsibility. So
Really?
you can think the foundational understanding has to be the understanding of the elements. And we're talking about
Right.
metaphysically inside ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, because the assessment and the connection with the divine and reading into a situation has to be pretty darn clear. So by the time you get to
Right. Yeah.
these last two initiations, they're high initiations.
Well, you have to be impeccable, as we've been talking about a lot.
Right.
Bella's been sharing this word impeccable, but also, you know, at this point, it's probably worth just reflecting that. And I think you did the Heaven on Earth course where we really go into the four directions and the elements and everything else. But every single imbalance that we experience, every emotional disturbance, every traumatic disturbance, when you track them back, they all come back to an imbalance in at least one of the elemental energies. So balancing our inner elementals is actually so much more fundamentally important to us than we've ever been taught, because you can work out pretty much through whether you have too much air, too little air, whether you have too many ideas, not any ideas at all, whether you have a preponderance to burn things or don't have any energy and can't get out of bed. These are simple understandings of too much fire, too little fire, and you can quickly work out where the imbalances in your emotions are coming from by just assessing the nature of the disturbance. And so at this point, Leslie, this is such critical information because without the foundational basis of the elemental energies, everything else is lopsided and out of balance.
Right, exactly. Right. So that it's very foundational. And that's why I found the dragons
Right, I get it.
as being very correlated with rhythmic,
Beautiful.
and also really teaching us something in the from the galactic history and myths, because we're going to go
Right,
on to say they failed the initiation on Vega because Khan felt that he identified, I mean, there are these beautiful, big physical creatures, right?
right.
That have all these powers of the elements, spiritual powers, really, to
Yeah.
move matter. They kind of over identified with matter because on Vega, their job was to guard the wing lion warrior taking the initiation on Vega. The wing lion warrior, the wing lion part of herself is meant to be the ruler. You've when you get to Vega as a wing lion and take an initiation there, you've gone through so many steps and you've learned how to be a leader, to move your ego aside. You learn how to be a channel for the divine. So when you're up to Vega taking your final initiation in that, if something attacks you, you're not going to swat it. You're just so in the divine. So creation said, Dragon, it's your important role to stand next to the winged lion. And you're guarding essentially divine will by letting the winged lion have its initiation, acquire its full power with the divine coming through it. But the dragons just couldn't believe it. They were too materially blinded. What that wing lion's just sitting there. What's happening? Nothing's happening. You know, I can blow fire. I can the creator made a mistake. I'm the leader. I'm the ruler. And this started like total havoc, you know, galactic wars. You know, this is a deep shadow of the dragon. So they failed. Annihilation, eradication, you know, that's why I have all this here. Rebel. Okay. So this is where I bring up what Bella said before. Oh, look at if we unfurl the cube and we like kind of paste matter to it and we don't have the balance with the bigger forces or the internal forces. So here's a visual representation, exactly what happened to the dragon, kind of just snaking down, having power over using its form, using its material being, its manifested being, its body, its physicality, right? Not keeping it in balance with the bigger forces. So yeah, well, I'm going to call that collapse of organization, balance, and equality. And what happened with that, a loss of understanding and contact with divine will. And that happened galactically. We're still carrying that, you know? So
Wouldn't you say, Leslie, perhaps that we're witnessing on some level the repeat or the play out of the original collapse? Because we're now in a society that's collapsing due to failed initiations of the past. And we're actually seeing, I feel, on one level, the collapsing of the systems due to those failed initiations into power and leadership. And so, collapsing of organization, balancing equality, loss of understanding and contact with divine will, that's pretty much where we are now, I would say.
I know,
Right?
I know, but I think this is such a conundrum
Right.
because we have the PTSD of the collapse. So
Yes.
we don't want to go into the depth of the shadow of it. to own it and come out the other side
I
and really
agree.
understand it. Instead,
Mm.
we're in this is where we get we're prey to repeating it and being more and more sort of contracted because of this, the PTSD of having it happen in the first place. Understandably, but we have to somehow, something has to happen that we move past that.
You know what,
Uh,
Leslie, this is a really important point, and we've called it somewhat in our house the facade of the collapse. It's like we're going through a collapse. We saw this in the recent immersions where we all did a complete deliberate collapse of our sense of self so that we could be reborn. Very, very powerful. And this needs to happen. It's almost like we need to go through this collapse, but it's not a real one because the energetic counterpart work has already been done, but we need to go through at least the theatre production of a collapse without the real terror that was originally designed for this collapse. This collapse was always going to happen one way or the other, and
yeah, but you know what the tricky part is? If you're not attenuated it's enough to know it's a theater and working it out,
right,
you're
yeah,
literally going to experience it like
like it's real.
like a real collapse.
Yeah,
And on the principles of geometries and magnetization and etheric forms, you're possibly going to bring it into your world,
right.
right?
Yes,
So this is a real, I feel like we're just in the eye of a needle now. So I found it very
I agree.
interesting that we're in the rhythmic moon now, because I feel like the whole outpicturing has been really coming into these questions that have been coming up with me in the correlations I'm making with the rhythmic, and what do we have to do really to understand the truth of this rhythmic tone and how to move past it.
Yes.
Now, I talked a little bit to Bay and Aniko about this. They said, some of it is it's our Atlantean karmas and traumas and definite soul traps that were planted in us along our theory, our central channel. And the hard part is, yes, we're called in to deal with it, but they said there's like in that journey, there's sirens, those beguiling feminine,
Mermaids, sort of.
yeah, that are like singing so beautifully to
Beguiling.
call us or distract us. And then I was talking to another friend who goes, and there's something to this. She goes, yes, 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 we need to understand and hold, the love and light, the parallel 5D to all this. She goes, but too many people are sort of seeing it on the Starbucks level. Like, oh, it's all good. I can go in and get my latte and, and I feel good. Not really
Not
like,
really.
yeah, I don't know if I'm expressing this right, but
No, I get it.
we're at a point of such seriousness with this. Um, yeah,
You know
and I
what?
have no, well, I can keep going or we can keep talking about this.
Well, I think this is a really interesting point because I agree with you wholeheartedly, and we've been observing the same thing. And in the nicest possible way, since we had the golden timeline of convergence back in October, what has been really apparent to me is that on the one hand, we're now spiraling up and out, whereas before we were spiraling in and down to that point, but now we started to spiral up and out. But at the beginning, the spiral was really tight. And as it's unfolded, a bit like a fern unfolds, the spiral is starting to go out. But as it kind of spirals out and up, the frequency of the planet is being lifted with it. It's doing it a notch at a time, so as it's not too much. But every time it goes up a notch, everything that can't match that frequency is being forced up for transmutation or I guess removal or extraction of some extent. And this is the way I think of it, and I would like to share with everybody as a visual, it's like a rising tide. And the trick is to keep your head above the water as it's rising, which is another way of saying make sure that you're in the right frequency. So when the frequency goes up again, as it will inevitably, that you're still riding the surf. Because if you don't do that, you're going to start to take in water and struggle and have overwhelm. So these kinds of pictures I use all the time when I'm having a bad day. It's like, oh, where am I? Am I going back down under the water, or am I managing to get back on my board and surf? And if it's the going into the water option, that's when I go into a meditation to assess why. Like, what is it that's pulling me down? Because it's always something within our field. We might perceive somebody else is doing it to us, but it's actually something in us. Now, it could just be the burden of being in the matrix for the whole of our lives, and that's now being removed. And so with that, there should be a huge upsurge. So again, this is just a kind of a way to remind everybody that this moment that we're in, we can't be having any of the fluffy business. There needs to be a really strong internal inquiry so that when you come to the Vega initiation, which everybody will at some point, you pass that initiation into the right use of power. Because if you haven't done the inner work and got to a place of balance and something's lopsided, it's going to come out in the initiation, and I suspect not in the most pleasant of ways, because these initiations are real things, right, Leslie? We've been through quite a few of them and been turned inside out by quite a few of them. So they're deliberately intense because they're spiritual tests. And I think, Leslie, in the last 10, 20 years, we in the spiritual community have got sort of the idea that it's all handed to us on a plate and we can put our feet up, call in Starbucks, maybe not even pick it up and get it delivered, and we don't have to do anything. Which by and large we don't really. All we have to do is sit and go inwards. We don't have to go anywhere. We don't have to spend a lot of money. All we have to do is maybe have a nice mugwort tea and sit in meditation for half an hour, and you will find out a lot of interesting information. But if you don't do that, then you don't receive any of that.
Right. And I think the whole idea of going into stillness and like we just had those 3 days of stillness, but
Yeah, powerful.
literally what is stillness? It is allowing you to just be receptive to that central channel. And that's kind of hard. We don't know because of the distractions. And we also can get we're so oriented towards productivity and doing that when we go
Right,
into that void, it can be kind of like, what's wrong with me? you know.
right.
Uh
That's very true.
right. But I think when we get down to it, speaking of the way things work and that we only have personal sovereignty, this is a realization that every being has to come to and exercise, and we're really looking for the tipping point for enough people to
Right.
to truly do that work. So let's look at what
Mm.
happened just galactically, so you know, when the dragons failed that initiation and did a few more things. The heart of the Orion constellation, which is Omega Orionis, that was the cradle of the Dragon Nation. It exploded because the idea of the Dragon Nation guarding divine will, was basically holding that star together. That was what the Holy Spirit held as the divine plan for the cradle of the dragons. And then the dissonance, the cognitive dissonance was so incredible that stellar world couldn't hold. It blew up. Um, and then, we have a lot of other things that happened and galactic wars and all that. But now I'm going to tell you something actually positive.
Wow, hold on. I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. Go on.
So in this great nebula of, in the middle of the Orion constellation, there's many nebula, which are literally like nurseries for stars, right? And stars being nodal points of consciousness. So there's germinations of new consciousness, especially, it works two ways. It's happening up there, but it's happening down here. And what we do down
Absolutely.
here feeds up there. So over time, over many whatever gazillions of years, new stars have been developing. And there's been sort of a recasting or a relearning from these some of the fallen dragon consciousness, where they're starting to understand that sparring or fighting is not about winning per se. Like, I've got to kill you and I've got to be right. It's moving beyond duality. It's coming to, oh, when you challenge me, that helps me grow. I can watch your challenge, meet it in a way that increases my light. So we start getting into our forces that are challenging us, that, let's say, when we're out of balance, or we're actually using it as a catalytical force to grow our light. Does that make sense? It's like a whole
Absolutely.
way of evolving. I think that's exactly what we need to do now, every day, every minute, at every choice point. And that's what takes us out of duality into neutrality and into more of what you would call the ego's perch or Christ consciousness. And then the interesting part is, if you really grow into that much light, those shadows don't even want to be around you.
It's
I mean,
true.
you don't even have to wield your sword and be ruthless. They may, in fact, they'll even necessarily wither in front of you because they can't be in that. Well, if they even choose to come near you, they'll wither. They can't be in that frequency.
Right.
So it's kind of taking the whole thing to a more of a quantum level. It's like bringing in more of the etheric tools into the material and raising it. So the blending and the balance between the two is operational and is well, it takes us to a whole new level. It allows us to come to a new level of outpouring and manifest. Well, it brings heaven to earth, right? It's everything we want. It's what these 13-day cycles are about, how we're
Right.
creating in whatever length they're in, moons or wave spells or bigger.
And also, Leslie, something about the struggle without the need to fight. I've seen this in a famous biodynamic garden nursery in Britain, where they have to be really stringent with the testing of the plants. They have to meet certain biodynamic levels of intensity of the compounds and so on. But one particular plant had escaped from the beds and had got into the wild hedge around the garden. And so they decided to test the plant that escaped into the hedge and the one that should have been in the bed. And the one that was in the bed didn't meet their very stringent requirements for them to be able to use it. However, the one that had escaped into the hedge and had to struggle with all of the other plants for its own position in the hedge was way above the levels that they needed to be able to use it as a product for their medicines. And they were showing me this because hadn't realized this until this point and said, isn't this interesting? Some plants actually do better when they're forced to struggle. And in that struggle, it's not about somebody winning, it's about becoming more empowered through, I guess we could say that's life struggles and all of the other things. And so I love this element of the dragons that teaches us this need to have a struggle, but without there needing to be a winner or a loser or somebody right and somebody wrong. There's just the challenge of the struggle. And I think the dragons are great guides for this.
Right, right. And that's a beautiful example. And it reminds me of like, well, okay, that could make an adaptogen. They go like, I'm going to win wherever I go. I'm going to make a balance, right?
Right? Yeah.
Put me in that circumstance and I'll make it work,
Right.
right?
I mean,
So,
in this case, the nettle is very dragon, very fire energy, very much boundary, but also very much weirdly, nettle is also about equipoise. It's the great meditational plant. Weirdly, you wouldn't think a fire plant like nettle would be great for balance, but if you drink a nettle tea before meditation, you will find it a lot easier just to come into a place of no mind. So very dragon orientated plant.
oh, that's very good to know. Well, let me tell you what happened galactically.
Yeah.
This whole conundrum is actually uh, healed, balanced, and set right on the galactic level. Um, this particular healed energy moved into our collective consciousness last year in 2024. So, well, actually, it's not last year now because it's 2026. But in other words, this is now a pattern that's healed on the above, as a reflection, but it's up to us to be integrating it. I mean, we're trying to integrate so much now. So much is happening on a galactic level that we're trying to integrate. This is one thing. So what happened was with the birth of these new stars in the nebula and this realization as they were developing about what we just went through, the using the battle as a catalyst for growing your own light. There was the birth of two new grand dragon grandmasters, not one, but two, which is interesting. I'm not going to be able to say their names very well, but Thork von Dam Amarind Sante Khan Mar Torak. Okay, let me tell you what they are about. Thork is a soul that awakened in the Orion Nebula. This consciousness fell through the corridor of the warrior's guilt because there was horrible energy patterns left after Khan rebelled, and because he was a leader, many dragons just followed without thinking. You're supposed to follow your leader or else you die. And some of them like went power hungry too. That's fine. Some of them after a while were like, what? This isn't me. I don't want to do this.
Right.
So there's huge, like, you know, there's huge complicated networks of emotions even on us in the collectively. We talk about balance emotions, we got it in our individual life, but there's like morphogenic fields or miasms of emotions. So the warrior's guilt was a big one. So this uh, consciousness fell through the corridor of warrior's guilt, and clinging to the light, he finally, or it, the consciousness finally rose through Thuban, that's the star of mercy, to a new state of being through redemption. And in other words, allowed itself to accept mercy, like gave it all up, said, okay, and was pulled up, and then basically being redeemed mean uplifted into something new. Like all those patterns were wiped away. It was brought back into a divine kind of frequency. Now
It's
that
interesting, Leslie, when I was working through my own dragon codes, I very much felt the energy of that dragon's plight. There was a really strong sense, at least from within my own dragon, of like the guilt of following a leader who we trusted and trusted him to the end. And he betrayed all of us, all of the dragon warriors that followed him. And by the time we realized that, it was all too late. And then we had to deal with everything that we created for ourselves. So it's been a long journey back for the dragon warriors from that situation. And from what I felt in myself and from the dragon codes in general was a deep sense of shame that we had allowed ourselves to be so duped, but also questioning the wisdom of the loyalty that we'd shown. So there were many, many deep philosophical questions for the dragons to work through. But I do feel with the last 6 months or so, many of our tribe have said this, the dragons have been really present and they actually feel happy in a dragon kind of a way. I mean, dragons are not the happiest of beings. They're quite stern usually, but they feel lighter, like the burdens of the past have been lifted. And even Khan now seems to be somehow released into a more etheric form of himself or something. So I feel the dragons are actually in good shape at this point. What do you think?
Well, I mean, that's what we're saying. I mean, we're told they were, this is, I'll finish talking about how they completely healed. And the healed energy has re-entered our collective consciousness so
Right.
they can take up the truth of their being on Gaia and their mission and service. So it's not surprising that people would feel them in a different way. And I've heard a lot of talk about, my gosh, the dragons are awakening, right? They're they're awakening in our consciousness in a proper way, perhaps. We're not
Yeah.
like so guilty and afraid of looking at it. But like when we
Right.
talk about that post-traumatic stuff that we don't want to look at, this would be one of them, this whole kind of energetic matrix.
And also, when you meet your own dragon, they are big energies. They're, I would say, the biggest of all of the energies in the stellar nations, and the whales are also big. But the energy and size of the dragons is quite a thing, and it's quite intimidating an energy to have to confront within yourself, particularly if your dragon has fallen. At least I'll speak from my own experience, bringing my dragon to heal literally put me in hospital. So, these are big energies, and their fall was a strong one. So, when you manage to integrate these energies, they form the sort of primordial powerhouse energy in the entire system. They fuel everything. But if they're out of balance, as Leslie is showing, well, then things can go a little bit left and right and a bit sideways sometimes.
Right. So now the second grandmaster, the Sante Kanmar, um, he had the initiation in Vega, and his deepest impetus, I mean, the whole heart of this consciousness was saying, show me how I can be the best guard of divine will, of the divine order, and guard the bastions of light again. How can I best serve the higher divine plan with my physical and mental strength? So this is a whole yielding and an opening and a questioning, and like, you show me. I'm not going to act like I'm the boss anymore. And that was through this is actually a reinitiation on Vega. So with that, I want to suggest we've got other geometric forms for the sixth side. Well, we've got the hexagram, which is Bella pointed out. I didn't put a picture of it on here, but she pointed out, well, isn't that interesting? It's the hexagram is what the honeycomb is made out of, which bees, which are, kind of mystical and I don't know. Supposedly bees come from Venus or have that consciousness. But that aside, let's go to the six-pointed star, because the six-pointed star, when you put it into dimensionality, is the Merkaba. And then you have now the two forces, the descending force and the ascending force. And then you have them going in counterclockwise directions. So think about it. Think about this being the higher aspect of what I said. If you meet something that seems to be, opposite, how you reconcile it. Well, what if you just go counterclockwise? Like, what if you take it into some kind of quantum form like the Merkaba? Because that becomes the light ship. That's literally your light ship. It turns your body into,
Right.
you know, a quantum mechanism. So what I'm saying is I think there's deeper mysteries about moving energy and coming into balance. When we just look at it, the material realm, you go, oh God, water's going to put out fire. Air's going to, earth is, what's the other one? Earth and air. You think they're opposites. You think they can't exist together.
It's
But
not
yet,
true though, is it? Like,
no, the rhythmic is saying they can. But I'm saying, well, God, if we're going to use a six-pointed thing and we're going to extend it into a dimensionality, let's make it a Merkaba. Let's use the counter forces and become a body of light and go travel.
well,
So
if you look at the five elements acupuncture layout where they use wood and metal instead of air, I've seen some really interesting diagrams that painted as a five-pointed star, and they call it the five movements. And if you think about fire and water, well, if you throw water over fire, it puts it out. But if you heat water with fire, it creates steam, which can be
yeah,
used to create motion or movement. So there's also a lot about the alchemical use of the elements and how to get them to interact to alchemize something into something else.
right. And all I would say is, we're not going to go down every pathway with that, but all the little things we're saying are like, wait a minute, let's not block our minds.
Yes,
The
exactly.
balance is we can make balance. We can go back to, well, the original quote, balance is achieved by accepting life as a process, an ongoing rhythmic motion requiring dynamic organization and reorganization constantly. Organization, reorganization, because it's a dynamic motion. We organize the elements of life to create balance, and all moments contribute equally to the sacred balance of our life. And then I organize in order to balance. I'm thinking, oh my God, there's so much fire and water, earth and air, masculine and feminine, free will, divine will, matter or body and spirit, above and below. And I'm sure there's more. And this is
Within and
really,
without, solar, lunar, and so yeah.
yeah. And this is the key, really. These are, well, just like the whole wave spell of, cycle of development is the key to bringing heaven to earth. But this is why I really feel like this is a choke point if we don't get through this. And I thought the dragons are really a good example of it, even in their cosmic history, and really showing us that, now we're just starting to reclaim and become aware of the 1320 time more so. So what I'm saying is, we're gonna we're gonna trip up with it at times. We're learning it. So I do want to point out a little bit more refining the whole idea of balancing within the divine ecosystem. Like how can we live with our free will within divine will? Because I think that's part of our I don't know, we have an inherent feeling or a rebellious feeling. I don't want to be subject to divine will. It's going to put me in a box. It's going to constrict me. But what's the divine ecosystem? It's divine love, divine law, divine mercy, divine will. These are the four pillars of creation that come out of the crux constellation and the cross in the southern skies. And actually, these always work together. They vibrate all at once and they affect everything. Now, we tend to identify with divine love and mercy as qualities of Christ consciousness, and we kind of stop there because we often think, oh, no, not divine will. But we have to recognize and express and represent all four qualities. So, this is another level of the balance. Because we tend to turn against divine will when we struggle for our autonomy, for using our free will. But divine will is actually a higher will than our own autonomy. And we get into these patterns where we revolt over and over and over, repeating the patterns against divine will. And they're really patterns that are create pain and separation. Um, so what are we actually struggling with? Because if we really think about it, divine will is actually the intention of the light within us. If we go back to the beginning of the wave spell, in the beginning of us as a consciousness, our focal point is that focal point of light that we wanted to manifest out in, in our lives as a consciousness coming into incarnations and whatever. That is the intention of the light within us. But when we lose that intention, that's when shadow appears.
Yeah.
And then all our illusions, what happens is we create things with our illusions. That's what has to collapse. We have to reconstruct ourselves and our lives from the light substance of our own soul to realize our destiny, because divine will is the intention of the light within us.
Beautiful.
And that's really all I wanted to say. Our dragon soul aspect has found balance on the galactic level. And
Yeah.
I think, us knowing that, you know, whether you know the stellar nations or not, I've just given you a little piece that you can take with you. And then really working the 1320 and and I'm really liking the fact that we have the whole moon to uh, sink into the tone, because then you get a deeper understanding. I would never get this understanding on just the sixth day of the wave spell, you know.
Yeah, that's very true, Leslie. And maybe if we just take the screen down to finish out today's transmission. Thank you, Leslie. That was really cool. I really enjoyed that because I had the snakes in that place, and so you've inspired and amazed me with your choices because they've all been absolutely divinely timed. The dragons are much needed in this moment, both at the planetary grid level because they are, along with the great felines, they're kind of like the wave and the particle, or the ley line and the nodal points, and so they will have to work harmoniously in this way with divine will and free will.
Well, you
But
know what? I didn't put it in here because I didn't want to make it too complicated. But another balance is the dragons with the great felines,
of
because they're
course,
both two kinds of warriors. And in fact,
right,
that came back in 2024 too. The great feline is healed. And then between them, there's a great healing.
you're right.
So that's a
That's
whole other
wisdom.
aspect of it. But, you're pointing it out in practicality. And it's interesting because I put the great feline as the self-existing or the form, so they're both dealing with matter in a way, and yet they need to really spiritualize matter by their, what is free will and divine will need to be a spectrum and brought down. That's heaven coming to earth
Heaven
when
to
you can
earth,
make
right.
free will and divine will operational as a beautiful collective reality.
Right, and so with this journey of the 13 moons, and we, here at QPW, we're doing a lots of different weaves, and so maybe some of you are like, where are they up to today? Well, this is the 13 moon journey that we're doing within our tribe at QPW, a group of pioneers leading the way with New Earth coordinates and New Earth energies within them. But this particular episode we're sharing here on YouTube, so that even if you're not in that journey with us, you get the opportunity to feel into some of the energies that are at work, to get little tasters from our wonderful sister Leslie here from the Stellar Nations Records, which is a vast tome of cosmic history through archetypal energies that we contain within us as part of our DNA. All of which is another way of understanding ourselves. So, hopefully, today we've been able to give a little taster of the importance of the dragon elemental lords because they're contained within us. They're, I think, our oldest part of our DNA, our primordial part. And so the dragon is really our foundational essence here in this realm. If we go back to the beginning of our soul's journey here on planet Earth, we probably started out as some sort of dragon. And we've gone all the way through this evolutionary process to come to this moment where we're ascending back to remembering we're cosmic human. But the dragon is such an important part of us and such a big part of us that until that becomes integrated fully, balanced with all four elemental energies, so that the fifth element of ether opens up, which creates the channel to the sixth dimension and beyond, then if those energies are not in balance, then those other things can't happen. And so the dragons really are the first stop on the railway line. It's like, okay, what do I need to make sure is in balance. Oh, my dragons need to be in balance. Otherwise, if you have a big fire dragon that is prone to outbursts and breathes fire first and asks questions later, you might find that people who are your friends are either now just breadcrumbs on the floor toasted, or that they don't want to hang around you so much. So these are hints and tips and clues from our environment as to which of our dragons might not be in balance internally. So then, as Leslie knows well, and from the Stellar Nations pathway, we have the invitation to go inwards to investigate all of these wonderful stars and beings that are part of our DNA and to bring them into balance by getting to know them. And each of us will have a different set of elemental dragons, or maybe one overarching dragon. But at this moment, with the weave of the 13 moons, we get to settle into these energies for 28 days. Now, this one that me and Leslie have done has come out just a few days before the end of this rhythmic moon, and we'll be doing the seventh tone probably, I imagine, in a couple of weeks' time. So, at this point, if you are listening to this, it probably will come as a review process for the moon that's just gone. So, if you can look back over the moon, the last 28 days or so, and reflect on how what Leslie has shared today may have played out in your life, it's an interesting exercise. We've been doing this a lot with some of the other components of the 13 moons, with the Maca, for example. Every time our brother Mike Sparrow delivers a transmission for the container for the group, it's amazing to look back over the previous transmission to see how all of that was playing out even before the transmission came through. So we can see that our higher selves are often playing the 3D game ahead of us. And if we understand that, we can communicate with the part of ourselves that is playing the 3D game ahead of ourselves and receive the signals back from that part of ourselves so that the present moment and the future and even the past all become one, fluidly operating together. So I don't know where that came from, but it wanted to be shared as part of the balancing of the elements. So Leslie, as always, the final words over to you and people who may be seeing you for the first time. Where can they find out more about Leslie's world and the world of Stellar Nations?
Well, I think Josh normally just puts my the email contact or the website contacts underneath.
But
So
people can come to you for readings, right? Or to get
yeah,
their
I've got
charts
readings, and
read.
in my satellite website, I have a forum you can join, and I do Zoom calls
Beautiful.
uh, and communicate with people. So that'll be all underneath. And I'll just say one more thing, not to go down another rabbit hole, but um, the cosmic humans, our lapse was feeling superior and wanting to push out all the stellar nations because we were given the stellar nations, we were meant to be containers for them. They're light seals, basically, energy patterns that are a way of experience, different ways of experiencing creation. The first thing that we pushed out, the thing that created the big battle, was the humans pushing out the dragons because humans were given control of the elements and the dragons were. And there was just this huge jealousy and fight. Um, and anyway, that's a little bit more. We won't go down that road,
Yeah,
but
I like
yeah,
it.
there's just so many mirrors in cosmic history. It's not about whether, oh, was that true? And was it 20 billion light years away?
It's,
It's not even linear. They're just energetic patterns that we live within that are active within us.
I agree.
So I think we should just leave it at that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm really happy to have this opportunity because
Me
in
too.
correlating the stellar nation with a tone, it's helping me learn a lot more from the inside, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Leslie, as always. And I'd like to think, and hopefully the audience can comment on this if they are still watching us at this point, that we're always just offering different ways to understand the universe around us, whether it's through geometry, whether it's through archetypes, whether it's through esoteric mysteries and everything else. But I feel like we might do a special show on the cosmic humans soon, Leslie. I feel it's incoming because what you just alluded to there was,
Well,
go
you
on,
know what? I'm interrupting you.
go on.
The incoming energy of 2026
Is
is the
the cosmic
cosmic human
human.
needing to we need to step up and realize the truth of our gifts and reclaim them. 2025 in the stellar nations terms, we've just been through a year of redemption, meaning every pattern and lapse of our 13
Yes,
strands has been popping up in front of us for
yes,
upliftment, and we can feel that. So,
yes.
but now if we've
Agreed.
done enough of the clearing, we're really in place to face and reclaim being a cosmic human in its true sense. But going back to our conversation, we got to know these little traps, the
Yes.
PTSD and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, let's
Well,
save it for another show.
yeah, I got to say one more thing on that note, though. So, the original cosmic human separation was the rejection of the parts that made the cosmic human the 13th, really, the mystical 13th. And so, what I've discovered on my journey, and as Leslie knows well, is I've had a lot of fun separating out the different characters and getting to meet them as individuals in their own right, but also as part of me. And on my cosmic birthday, which is the mystical 13th, of course, I got to experience that in the most profound of ways. And I'll just share it briefly here as maybe hopefully something inspiring. Because I dedicated all of that time in meditation and journey work to meeting each of the nations, each of the strands of DNA on my cosmic birthday in this current Zolkin, and I think this could apply to everybody if you have the intuition and intention, was I asked for everything that I needed to be downloaded. And so what happened was I had a magical moment in meditation where I saw all 12 components of me sat around having a discussion, a council meeting. And I was like, that's really weird. These are all parts of me. So who am I? And this voice came out from somewhere. I guess it was my higher self, just started laughing and said, duh, you're the 13th. The awareness that you're having of the rest of you is because you are the quantum aspect of your consciousness perceiving the bits that make it up, the components that make
That's
up the
beautiful.
totality.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
anyway, I thought that would
yeah.
be to share.
There's so much mystery, but underlying it, I think you got the trauma, but you got a lot of fun, potential
Yes.
fun. And I think that's what we're asked to remember too with the
Yeah.
elementals, the fairies and elves coming back, the play, the mystery of creation, the inner child. So, but all to be continued. There's many streams here. So
Yes, there
thank you
are.
so much.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, as always, Leslie. And if you do want to get to know your inner elementals better, please do check out the Heaven on Earth course on quantumplanet.world. And please also check out Nature's Gift, a first aid kit for the moment that we're in, filled with lots of plant love, healing, and energy in case you're having a tricky moment. So, anyway, please do check those out. Thank you again, Leslie. Thanks again to all of the Stellar Nations family for being super present at the moment. We really do feel you. And thank you to all of you, dear brothers and sisters, for again tuning in for another Cosmic History Godes. We'll see you all again very soon in Lakesh. And bye for now.
Thank you.